Alright, welcome to the channel. My name's James and today I'm going to walk you through how I paint brown skin tones. We're going to be utilizing a lot of glazes, filters and color variation across the skin to create that realistic information and detail. So let's get into it. So this is what you clicked on the video for. Today we're going to be painting up this brown skin. Now whenever I painted up this model I was using a strong directional light. If you're not going that direction then just apply these steps all over the model. And to achieve this skin tone, you'll need some copper brown, Mournfang brown, Doombull brown, Citadel flesh tone, Moonray flesh, plague green, and velvet red. All the paints will be listed below in the description along with the Games Workshop equivalents. So starting from a zenithal prime where I primed the model in black and then shot grey from the direction of the light, we're going to apply the copper brown contrast paint all over the skin. This just helps to establish a nice even base, provide us with some subtle shading in certain areas and help define some of the volumes. We're then going to come in with some Mournfang brown and apply that to the raised areas of the skin. We're also going to feather that out into the shaded areas or where the black was whenever we did the zenithal prime. And you don't need to worry too much about preserving the shading in areas that the light's interacting with. So we're now going to take a mix of Mournfang brown, Doombull brown and Citadel flesh tone. We're introducing the Doombull brown to add some more warmth and redness into the skin. So you'll find with these like lighter brown tones or lighter brown skin tones, there's actually quite a lot of like orange, reds and those warmer tones within the skin tone. So adding in the Doombull brown really just helps to emphasize that. So with this mix you basically just want to block in the major volumes. We're not worried about the individual separation between the musculature at the minute, we're more just blocking in where the light's going to be interacting. So try to keep it pretty loose and just work to block in those big areas and big sections of the skin. And in the areas where the light's interacting, I'm not too worried about preserving that shading. We're going to introduce the definition and separation within the musculature whenever we start introducing those higher values and brighter highlights. So adding more Citadel flesh tone into the mix, we're going to come back in and re-establish some of those highlights or really just introduce some higher values into those areas. Again, in those areas that are being predominantly hit by the light, I'm not too worried about preserving the shading in those sections. And whenever I'm working around the abs in the midsection, I'm not trying to create deep recess shades in this area because that will give you that sort of turtle shell effect in this area. So you want to keep it quite soft. Remember, skin is translucent. The light will come through, bounce around and reflect out in different directions. So you tend to end up with these softer transitions and softer gradients across the skin. And if your model's not wearing a helmet, be sure to emphasize the highlights around the top of the head, the forehead, the eyebrows, cheekbones, nose, chin and jawline. So now using some pure Citadel flesh tone, I'm starting to introduce some definition and some indication of striations in certain areas across the musculature. So I'm mainly going to be focusing on those big slabs of muscle where there's not a lot of body fat retention and you can actually see the underlying striation and structure of the muscles. But again, we're keeping it quite loose. We're not too worried about creating these harsh defining lines or harsh separating lines within the musculature. Now you may also think that some of these highlights are getting quite bright, but we're going to push them even further. Whenever you're painting skin tones like this, you actually want to push your highlights super bright to like 11. That way you can use filters and glazes to bring them back down and reintroduce the color. So you'll see here I'm even adding those highlights into the recesses between the muscles because that section is perpendicular to the light source or getting a lot of light. So even in some of the recesses, you can add some highlights in there to create separation and definition within the model. If you're enjoying the video so far, don't forget to hit that like. It really helps to promote the video and helps the channel grow. And if you're feeling frisky, don't forget to give that subscribe a wee slap and a tickle. You can also drop a comment below to help please the algorithm. And whenever I'm adding these brighter highlights to the top of the shoulders and into the traps and the clavicle and stuff, I'm feathering it out as I head towards the rear of the model to create a smooth transition into the shaded sections or the shadowed areas of the model. Now for the final highlights, I kind of want to go with something slightly more desaturated without those predominantly warm tones in there from the Doombull brown. So I'm just using Moonray Flesh and Mournfang brown here for the brightest highlights. And we're really looking to emphasize the striations and the shape of each individual volume within the musculature at this stage. And you can see that the paint's kind of thin here. We're kind of working with that semi-transparent layer consistency. That way we can build it up over a number of passes to create different opacities and create more variation within the skin. And as I tend towards these brighter sections, I feather it out as I head towards the rear of the model or into the shaded areas. Now I'm starting to be a wee bit more specific in the abs and in the abdominal region, just trying to pick out some detail and individual musculature in that area, but still softening out those transitions as I work across to create that smooth gradient within the skin. So now it's time to create some variation and additional information within the skin. We're going to use a number of contrast paints, but you can use inks or washes to create the same effect. So I've taken some Play Green from Vallejo Xpress range and I've thinned that down with a bit of water. So I'm applying this colour into the recesses or into the darkest areas in the model. This will help to neutralise some of those warmer tones because red and green opposite on the colour wheel, so they will desaturate each other. This will help to make our shadows look darker, and you can also apply it into various sections across the model, like the back of the hands, the wrists, inside of the elbows, certain areas around the neck and stuff, places where you have like a large collection of veins. Now we're going to repeat this process with some Velvet Red, but this time we're going to target the blush areas or the warmer areas within the skin. So obviously into the face. If your model's not wearing a helmet, be sure to get around the temples, the cheekbones, the nose. If your model has any cuts or there's any damage or trauma to the skin, introduce the red there. That can give the impression of some inflammation or some open wounds across the model. And then add it in around the vital organs, so around the rib cage, around the abdominals, around those larger sections of muscle where there might be some pump or an increase in blood flow during the fight, during the combat. Alright, so we've defined all the volumes and the details across the skin and the musculature within the model. We've introduced the colour variation with the greens and the reds, and now we're going to come back in with the copper brown. I've thinned this down towards a glaze or a filter consistency, and I'm applying it all over the skin. I'm pulling it from the brighter sections towards the darker sections and building it up gradually. So applying a layer, letting it dry, applying another layer and building it up until I have the colour that I want. And finally we're just going to add in some super bright highlights, again using that Moonray Flesh and Mournfang brown mix, just to really emphasize some of the musculature and striations across the model and those areas that are getting the most light. And again, if your model doesn't have a helmet, be sure to emphasize all of those details within the face. But once you're done, you should look something like this. I think this technique and approach creates a really interesting and realistic look to your brown skin tones. Adding in that colour variation with the greens and the reds really helps certain areas pop and creates a lot of subtle variation within the skin. Using that almost underpainting style to establish all the volumes and details, and then using filter layers to bring back the colour really helps to control the values and define the volumes. It also helps to add a softer and more natural look to the skin, creating smooth gradients with a more diffuse reflection pattern.
Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you have any comments, questions or suggestions for future videos, please drop them below in the comments. And if you want to show me what you've been working on, head on over to the Discord and drop some pics into the whips or the completed projects. I'd love to see what you've been painting. If you'd like to get some personalised coaching and tuition, head on over to the Patreon and check out the available packages. There'll be something there to suit everybody. All links can be found below in the description. Thank you again for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you at the next one.